Hey guys, how's it going? In this video, we'll be building a HTTP API in Golang, and we'll be using the Gorilla Web Toolkit Mux package for the routing. So let's just do a quick demo of this API. So here I have Postman, and this is an application that we can use to test HTTP APIs. And currently I have all of these requests set up already for each of the routes that we'll be creating in this API. So the first route here is the route which has the HTTP method of post, and the URL is /posts. This route is used to create new posts, and posts are the entity that we are using in our API. So if we actually go back to the code, and here is the post struct, and as you can see, we have three fields. We have the title, the body, and the author. The title and the body are of type string, and the author is a custom type called user. And user is defined up here, and it contains the full name, the username, and the email. Okay, so let's go back to Postman, and here we can see that these are the fields that we have included in the request body. Okay, and the next request here is the get/post request. So this request is used to get all of the posts in our collection, because in our API we have a slice down here called posts, and this is the variable where we are going to store all of our posts. And the get/post request is used to get all of the posts in that slice. Okay, and the next request here is the get/posts/id. So this looks very similar to the previous one. However, here in the URL we have /0. So this can actually be anything. This can be any number. So for example, this could be /posts/100 or /35 or /2. This is because this is a dynamic route parameter, meaning that it's like a variable. And what this means is that our code can see what this data is. And so we can use this data in our route handlers. So for example, in this case, this route parameter is used for the post ID. So for example, when we make this request, we would be getting the post which has the ID of 2. And if we change this to get/posts/50, then we would be getting the post which has the ID of 50. Okay, let's move on to the next request. This request is the put request, and the put request is used for updating. We will see how this works in just a minute. Let's just look at the next one, which is patch. And the patch request is also used for updating, but in a slightly different way. And the next one, the last request here, is the delete request, which is used for deleting posts. Great, okay. Let's now go and, first of all, let's see the get/posts request. Let's send this. Okay, and here we have an empty array in the API response. That's good because we haven't created any posts yet. So let's go to the post request and let's send this request. This is the JSON body that we are sending in the request. Let's send this. Okay, and here we can see that we have this post in the response. That's great. Let's now go to the get request and let's send this. Great, so here we have an array with this post inside the array. Great. Let's now go to the get/posts/id route, and let's set the ID to 0. And this is because the ID of the posts is actually, in this case, in this API, it is the index position of the post in the slice. And since the post that we want to get is the first item in the array, that means that we want to set the ID to 0 here. Okay, let's send this. Okay, and now we have an object which contains all of the post fields in the response. Great. Let's move on to the put request. So the put request is used for updating posts. So here we have the HTTP method set to put and the URL set to /posts/0. Okay, good. Let's now go to the body. So this is the request body. And here I have some data that I have created before. And it's simply setting the title to updated by put request. And it's setting the body to ABC. And it's changing the author fields to full name Jane Doe, username jane.doe, and email janedoe@test.com. Okay, so let's send this request. Okay, and we can see that we have an object returned, and this is the updated post data. And it looks good. All of these fields have been changed to what we set in the request body up here. Cool, alright. Let's now move on to the patch request. And actually, before we move on to the patch request, let's first talk about why we need two different methods for updating posts. Because here we have the put request and the patch request, and they are both used for updating. But there is one big difference between them. So let's go to the put request, and let's say we wanted to only update a few fields. So not update all of these fields, but only update, let's say, the title. So let's update the title, and let's set this to this has been updated again. Okay, let's now send this. Okay, and let's go down to the response. So the title has been updated, and it's been set to this has been updated again. That's correct. However, everything else has been set to its default value. All of these values here are empty strings. The reason that this is happening is because the way that we're going to be coding the put request root handler is we're going to be replacing the whole post object with what we have sent in the request body. So this object here is completely replacing the post object in the slice. And since only the title has been defined, all of the other fields have been set to their default values. So that's why we need another route which can handle partial updates for when we don't need to update the whole post. And that's why we need the patch request. Let's go to the patch request and let's go to the body. Okay, so here we have an object which contains only the body field. Okay, so let's send this request. Okay, and here we have the response. Cool, alright, so the body has been updated to this has been updated by a patch request. And the title is still the same from the put request. And these have remained the same from when we did this put request here. So to show this a bit clearer, let's actually go back to the put request and let's set all of the fields here to have a value. So let's go here to the put request and let's go to the body of this request, and I'm just going to undo what I did before so that we have this object here with all of these fields and their values, and let's send this. Great, okay, so let's now go back to the patch request and let's only update. Let's go back here. Let's see, what can we update? Let's update the body again. So it's currently ABC, and we can confirm this if we go to the get request here and let's send this request. And here in the response, we can see that the fields contain the updated data. Great. Let's now go back to the patch request and let's set the body to testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, and currently it's set to ABC. So let's send this and let's see what happens. Okay, great. So here we have all of the data that we had before. So for example, the title has stayed the same and the author data has stayed the same, but the body has been updated to testing 1, 2, 3. Great. And let's confirm this by going to the get request and let's send this request. And now we can see that this has been updated to testing 1, 2, 3. Great. And now let's go and test the delete route. Okay, and let's set this to delete /posts/0. That's good. Okay, so let's go and send this now. Let's send this request. And here we don't get any response body because we don't need a body, because there is no data to send back to us. But since the status is set to 200 OK, we know that this request has worked. Let's now confirm this by going to the GET request, and let's send this. Great, so now we get a status of 404 not found, and here we can see that the response message is no post found with specified ID. Great, so now that post no longer exists. Cool, alright, so that was a demo of our API, so let's get started building it. Alright then, let's get started. The first thing I want to do is find a folder where I want to create the project, and this is the folder where I want to create the project. So let's create a new folder, and let's call this Golang Basic HTTP API. Okay, and then I'm going to open this in Visual Studio Code, which is the code editor that I'm going to be using. Okay, and first of all, make sure that your editor has Golang support. So in Visual Studio Code, the way that you do that is by going to the extensions and then searching for Go, and then installing this extension here. Okay, once you've done that, then you have to then go to the command palette, which is here, and then you have to run the command go install/update tools, and then click on that and click this checkbox here to select all of the tools, and then click OK. I've already installed all these tools, so I'm not going to click OK, but once you've clicked OK, VS Code will then install all of these tools for you. Okay, alright, let me just click out of that. Let's close this and go back to the Explorer. Okay, and let's now create our file. For this tutorial, we will be writing all of our code in one file. This is because it's a very simple API, and we don't need more than one file. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this http-api.go. Okay, and the first thing we have to do is we have to set the package as main, and we have to create the main function. Great, okay. The next thing we have to do is we have to import some things. So let's do import. First of all, let's import encoding/JSON. This API will accept JSON in the body of the requests, and it will respond with JSON in the body of the response. So that is why we have to import encoding/JSON. Okay, and let's now import net/HTTP, and also we have to import a third-party library called Gorilla Mux. So let's actually go to the GitHub page for that. This is the HTTP router that we are going to be using in our project. So let's go down here, and we can see that we have to use the go get-u github.com/gorilla/mux. We have to use this command to install the dependency. Alright, so let's just copy that, and let's go back to our code editor, and let's go to the terminal, and I'm just going to paste this in. Okay, and press enter, and that will now install the Gorilla Mux library. Okay, and now we can import it up here. So github.com/gorilla/mux. Great, okay. And now let's go back to the main function. The main function is a special function because this function is the function that's called when we execute our Go application. So in here we have to set up the router. So let's do router is equal to mux.new router. Okay, let's now save this. And we're getting an error here. Oh, and that's because these should be brackets, normal brackets, not curly brackets. Sorry about that. Let's save that now. Okay, and it removed my imports. Let's just Control Z that. These should stay. The reason that those were deleted is because each time I save, Visual Studio Code executes go_thumpt, which is a command which formats all of the code, and it removes the imports that are unused. And we haven't used these yet, but we will do soon. So I'm just going to Control Z that. And let's go here. So here we have an error, and it's saying that new router returns a new router instance, and it's been declared. This variable has been declared, but it's not used. Okay, that's fine. We are going to use it soon. We actually have to use it now to set up the routes. So let's do router.handle func, and this takes in a path, and let's set the path to /test, and let's set the function to test. Okay, and now we actually have to create this function. So let's go down here and let's create the test function. Okay, and this function is a route handler, and it therefore has to take in two parameters. The first of which is the response writer, which we will call W, and this is of type http.response writer. Okay, and the second parameter is the request, the HTTP request variable, and this we can call R, and this is of type pointer. So we use the asterisk here to say that this is a pointer, and it's a pointer to a http.request value. Okay, great. Alright then, okay, so now we can do, very simply, we can do w.write, and for now let's just pass in a string, and let's just call this is a test. Okay, so this will respond with a string that says this is a test, and we can't actually do this because this method is expecting a byte array, a slice, a byte slice. So we have to do the conversion. So to do that, we can do square brackets byte, and then we can enclose this string in brackets like that. So that should hopefully now work. Let's save this now. Okay, and that has actually removed my encoding/JSON import, but don't worry, we can add that back later, because for now we just want to test out this route here. Okay, so one thing we have to do before that is we have to start the web server. So let's go here. We first have to start this web server. This web server has to be listening to requests, and to do that we can do http.listen and serve, and let's pass in the address. We can make this listen on localhost port 5000. Okay, so this just means localhost port 5000. Okay, and the second argument here is the router. This is the handler, right? And we have to pass in the mux router. Okay, great. So that should now work. This listen and serve method actually returns an error, and we can see how this works if we go to the GitHub page for Gorilla Mux, and let's search for listen and serve, and we can see here how it's being used in the examples. We can see that log.fatal is used to surround the listen and serve method, so that if there is an error, then it's logged to the console. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that that is what you can do. You can create an error variable and you can assign it to the return value of this method. Great, okay, so let's save this now and let's go to the terminal and let's run this file. Let's type in go run http-api.go. Okay, press enter, and now we get this Windows security alert because this application is accessing the network. So I'm just going to allow access. There we go, and now it's running. Okay, so our application is now listening for HTTP requests to the address, which is localhost port 5000. So now let's try and make some requests to our API. I am going to be using Postman to make these requests. Okay, so let's just open up Postman. Okay, and I'm going to make a new request to localhost 5000/test. Okay, because that's the route that we set up here, /test. Okay, let's send this request. And there we go. We get this is a test returned back to us. That's awesome. So we actually have our first functioning route. It's not very useful, but it does work. That's awesome. Okay, so now let's go back to the code and let's make this a little bit better. Instead of sending a string, we could instead send a JSON object. Okay, so let's delete this. And first of all, let's go back up to this import statement here. And let's import encoding /JSON. And let's go down here. And let's now do JSON.newEncoder, which takes in a io.writer. So this takes in a variable which satisfies the interface io.writer. And the response writer that we have here does satisfy the io.writer interface. So we can pass in w, and we can then do .encode, and then in here we can pass in a value that can be converted to JSON, and we can do this by using a struct. So in Go, a struct is a collection of named fields. So we could create a new type. For example, we could go up here and we could do type test and then struct, and then we could do something like data, which is of type string, and that would be a struct, and then we could pass in an instance of that struct in here. However, for this simple example that we have here, we can use a anonymous struct, which means we don't have to predefine the struct to create a instance of a struct. I hope that makes sense, but it's basically an anonymous struct, right? So we don't have to predefine the type. Okay, so the way that we would do this is by typing in struct and then curly brackets, and then here we have to define the fields in the struct, just like we would when we create a struct using the type, then the struct. So this is a struct which is called test, and we can set the fields here, and we could call this data, which is of type string. So the same way that we create the struct this way is the same way that we have to create the struct here in the anonymous struct. So here we have to set, for example, let's call this field ID, and let's say that this is a string. And there we go, that's all we have to do for that. And then, now that we've defined what this struct contains, we now have to set the value. So go to the end of this curly bracket block here, and then do another pair of curly brackets, like that. And here we can set the value of these fields. And in this case, we only have one field, which is the ID. So we could do ID, and then we could set this to 555, or we could just put 555, and that would work as well, because this is the shorthand way of doing it. This is the shorthand way of setting values to an instance of a struct. Okay, and yeah, so that is how you create an anonymous struct. We first use the struct keyword, and then we have a block here which contains the struct definition, and we then have another block here which contains the values of the fields. Okay, so let's go back up here and let's remove this. It would probably have been easier to just use a normal struct type like we had here. That would have been easier, probably, but it's pretty nice to know how to create an anonymous struct. Okay, let's save this now, and let's go to Postman, and let's send this, and we get the same result. Okay, that's because we forgot to restart the server. So let's press Control-C to cancel that command, and then let's do go run http-api.go. Okay, and we get this Windows security alert pop up again. Okay, let's just allow access. Okay, and let's go back to Postman and let's send. Great, so now we get a JSON object back which contains the ID which has the value 555. Awesome. However, Postman thinks that this response is in text format, not JSON. The reason that this is happening is because we didn't set the content type header on the response. So the way that we can do this is we can go up here and do w.header.set and then pass in the key and the value. The key will be content-type and the value will be application/JSON. Let's save that now, and let's go to the terminal and let's restart the server. So Control-C to cancel that, and then do go run http-api.go. Okay, and we now get this show up again. Okay, so this is showing up each time we restart the server. This can get quite annoying, so there is actually a way to prevent this from happening. The reason that this is happening each time we restart the server is because we are using the go run command. And each time we use the go run command, Go will generate a new executable file which has a different name each time. And therefore, Windows will keep on asking us each time because it's a different file name and it doesn't remember what we said for the previous build of the application. And we can see that if we look at this here. So here we can see that this is build 464060682, and let's cancel this and let's Control-C and let's rerun that command, and we can now see that this is completely different. So each time we use the go run command, a new executable is created, each time with a different name, and therefore Windows Firewall thinks it's a completely different application. It doesn't remember what we chose here, because usually Windows Firewall will remember what we chose the next time we open the application. So let's just click cancel here and let's Control-C to cancel that, and let's use a different method of building and executing our application. So instead of using go run, let's use go build. The go build command will build our application into an executable file. Okay, so press enter, and then we can now see that we have this exe file show up here. This is the compiled version of our Go program. So now we want to run this program. So let's go to the terminal and let's now do /golang-basic-http-api and press enter. and that will now run the program. And this will show up again. That's fine. Let's click on allow access. And there we go. That's fine. Let's now do Control C and let's run that again. Let's execute that executable file again. And now this time we don't get that pop-up because Windows Firewall remembers that we trust this application because it has the same name. Alright, so let's do Control C and let's try and recompile this program and then run the program. Let's do go build again. Actually, let's just change something quickly. Let's go here and let's just comment this out and let's save this. And then let's go here and let's do go build again. Okay, and let's now try and execute the program. And it works without showing the Windows Firewall pop-up. Great. Even when we change our application and recompile it and then execute it, the Windows Firewall pop-up doesn't show. Awesome. Okay, so from now on, that is what we'll be doing. We will first be using the go build command to compile our code and generate the executable file, and we will then be executing that executable file to start our API. Great. Okay, let's get back to what we were doing. Let's go here and let's uncomment this. Okay, let's save it. And then let's go to the terminal and let's Control C. And instead of doing two commands, let's do one line which contains those two commands. So go build, and then we can use the ampersand 2 times to then type in another command that will be executed straight after go build has finished. So here we can then do Golang -basic-http.api.exe. Okay, press enter, and there we go. So that is now running the API. Okay, let's go to Postman and let's click send. And now we get the same response, but now it's formatted as JSON because Postman now knows that this response is in JSON format because of the headers. Let's click on the headers tab here, and we can now see that the content type has been set to application/JSON. Great. Okay, let's go back to the code and let's make this a little bit more interesting. So let's create a slice and let's create a route that can add items to that slice. So let's go up here and let's create a slice. Okay, so let's call this data. Var data is of type string slice. Okay, and let's set this equal to a new string slice. Okay, and let's create a new string slice. Okay, this is a composite literal. This is one of the ways we can create a slice in Go by using the composite literal syntax. Alright then, okay, so let's now go down here and let's create a new route handler. Let's call this add item, and this is a route handler, so it will have the same parameters as the test function here. So we'll get the response writer, so w http.response-writer, http.response-writer are pointer to http.request. Okay, this asterisk here means it's a pointer, so that's all it means. The type that this pointer points to is http.request. Alright, let's now go up here and let's set up a new route. So let's do router.handlefunc, and this will take in the path, which we can set as /add, and then we also want to send data. So one way we can send data in a HTTP request is by putting the data inside the request path. So, for example, we could have a dynamic variable inside this path. And using the Mux library, we are able to do this using curly brackets. So here we can type in the dynamic variable name inside these curly brackets. And then later, inside the root handler function, we can then access that data using the variable name. So, for example, let's set this to data. So now we have created a root which has a dynamic variable with the identifier data. Okay, and let's just set the function here to add item. Okay, great. Let's now go here, back down to the add item method, and inside here, the first thing we want to do is access that dynamic variable. So the way that we do this is by creating a new variable, which we can call data, and we can set this to mux.vars, and this is a function that returns the root variables for the current request, if any. Okay, so let's call this function and pass in the HTTP request pointer, which we named R. Okay, this parameter here. Great, okay, so this vars function will return a map which has keys which are strings, and the values are strings as well. And the keys are the variable identifiers. So in this case, data is the identifier. So we can get access to the data variable by accessing the item in this map that has the key of data. So, for example, we can now use square brackets to access the data value by typing in data. Okay, great. So now we have access to the data variable. Great, okay, so now we can add that data to the slice, this slice up here. And we can do that using the append function, which is an inbuilt function. So let's say data is equal to append, and then we have to pass in the slice, which we call data. And actually, I just realized that we shouldn't call this data. Let's instead call this root data, or root variable. And let's now pass in the root variable here. Okay. Okay, so sorry about that. That was a bit confusing. I shouldn't have called this data. Let's actually change this variable name here to something. Let's rename this to something different to make this less confusing. Let's change this to item. Okay, so now the root variable is called item. So now we can go back down here to the add item function, and we can change this to item. Okay? Okay, and now we can do JSON.new encoder, and then pass in W, and then do .encode, and we can encode the data. So then this will return back the slice to the caller. And this is useful so that we can then see the state of the slice. So each time we append data to the slice, we can then see the items inside the slice. Okay, let's save this now. And let's go to the terminal, and let's Control-C to cancel the execution of that. And then let's do go build, and then /golang -basic -http -api.exe. Okay, and that's now running. Let's now go to Postman, and let's now create a new tab, and let's set this to localhost 5000 //add, and then we can send it and see what happens. hopefully we should get an error because we haven't actually defined a root handler for this. We only defined a root handler for /add/ this variable here. So this should return an error. Let's try and send it. Great, okay, so here we get a 404 not found. Cool. Let's now do /add/ and then let's type in some data. So let's just type in ABC. And this can be anything, right? This can be anything. But for now, let's just set this to ABC and let's click send. Great. So now we get a slice which contains ABC. Awesome. Let's go here and let's add a new item. Let's add 1, 2, 3 and let's click send. Great. So now we have 2 items in the slice. We have ABC and 1, 2, 3. Great. One issue we do have is that this is being displayed as text and not as JSON. So let's fix this now. Let's go back to the API code and let's go to the add item function and let's do w.header.set content -type and let's now set this to application/JSON. Okay, and let's save this now and let's go to the terminal and let's Control-C to cancel that, and let's now do that same command, go build and /golang-basic-http-api.exe, and actually we don't need this .exe at the end here, okay, because you may be on Mac or on Linux, and in that case this command will work like that. Okay, press enter. Okay, and let's now go back to Postman and let's resend this request. Okay, and now we get an array with 1, 2, 3 and it's formatted with JSON styling here because Postman knows that this is a JSON value because of the content type. Awesome. Okay, great. Okay, let's go back to the body, and the reason we don't have the previous entries was because we restarted the Go application. So we are storing these items in this slice, and each time we restart the application, we lose all of the state. So that's why we don't have those values. But let's add a few more. Let's add testing. There we go. And now we see 1, 2, 3 testing. And let's add this is a test. And this is a string that has spaces. So that's quite interesting. Let's click send. And now we have this is a test showing up here as well. Awesome. Great. Let's add another one. /add/devstacker. Let's send that. And now we have devstacker here. And let's add 555. Awesome. Okay. Let's add Golang. And let's add 1. And let's add 1337. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we've created this route that can add an item to a slice in our application. Awesome. Great. Okay. Let's now talk about HTTP methods. So with HTTP requests, we can use one of many different methods. And if we go to Postman and we go to this drop down here, we can see all of these methods. So these are the HTTP methods that we can use for our request. And so far, we have just been using the get method. But since we haven't specified the method for our routes in our code, let's go back to the code and let's go up here to where we have set up the routes. So here we haven't actually specified the methods for these routes. So that means that Mux will accept any method for the route that can access the /test path or the /add/item path. So what that means is we can go to Postman and we can change this to put, and we can send this, and we now get the new item being added, or we can set this to delete and we can send this, and we have this new item here. So this request works with any method. But we can change this so that it only works with certain methods. So let's go back to the code and let's be more specific about the methods. Let's go to the /add/item root here and let's do .methods. And here we can see that it takes in strings. And these 3 dots here means that this is a variadic parameter. A variadic parameter, which basically means that we can enter in any number of strings. So for example, we can set this to get and then do another string, and let's type in delete. And we can add as many as we want. So we could add here put and post, etc. However, for now, let's just put get and delete. Okay, so let's remove these two so that we only have get and delete. Okay, let's save this now. And let's go to the terminal and let's do Control-C to close that one. And then let's do go build and /Golang -basic -HTTP API. Press enter. Okay, let's go back to Postman and let's now go up here and let's change this to test and let's press enter. And now we only have this one test here, and that's because we restarted the server. So now we only have one item. Great. And we are currently using the delete method. Let's change this to the get method and let's click send. And now we have 2 tests. Great, so that one worked. Let's try this with post. And this shouldn't work because we are only allowing the get and the delete methods to be used on this route. So let's see what happens when we press send. Great. Okay, so we get this 405 method not allowed status, which is an error status that is telling us that this method is not allowed for this route. Great. Let's now try this with patch and let's click send. And we also get the 405 method not allowed. Let's try this with options. Let's click send, and that doesn't work either. Great. So this only works with get and delete. Let's get delete up here and let's send this, and now we have 4 test strings here. Awesome. Let's try and add one more, send, and that works perfectly as well. Great. Alright then, okay. Let's now talk about the different types of methods and what they represent. So there are no strict rules that are enforced on how we should use methods. So for example, we can use the delete method to get data. However, there are very strong conventions that we should follow, right? So for example, it would be a very bad idea to use the delete method to retrieve data. And it wouldn't be good to use the get method to delete data. Usually, the get method is used purely for retrieving data, and the delete method is used for deleting data, and the post method is conventionally used for creating new data. So here, we are currently using the delete method to add data, to create new data. So this is something the post method should be used for, not the delete method, because this is confusing. So let's go back to the code and let's change this so that we just use the post method for adding an item. Okay, let's save this now and let's go to the terminal and restart the application. So Control-C to cancel the execution of this one, and now let's do go build and Golang -basic -HTTP API, press enter, and then let's go back to Postman. And now let's try and send this request. And now we get a 405 method not allowed status. Great. Let's change this to get, and let's send this. and we also get a 405 status. Great. Let's now test this with post. And let's click send, and that works. Awesome. Great. All right then. Let's go back to the code, and let's make this a bit more interesting. So first of all, let's get rid of this test root here. We don't need it anymore. Let's get rid of this, and let's also delete the test function. We don't need this. Okay. So now we are just left with the add item function and the root here. Okay. So let's make this a bit more interesting. Instead of storing strings as our data, let's instead use a custom type. So let's go and create a custom type, and in Go we do this using structs. So let's type in type, and now we want to type in the name of this struct, which will be item, and this will be struct, and then we can use curly brackets, and now we can type in the fields that this struct will contain. So this will have a data field, which will be of type string. Okay, and that's all it will contain for now. Later on, we will add one more field to this, but for now, this struct just contains one field called data, which is of type string. Okay, and the next thing we have to do is change this string slice to a item slice. Okay, so let's change this to item, and let's change this to item as well. Great. Let's now go to the add item function, and let's now update this to use the item struct, the custom type that we just created. So first of all, we aren't going to be using a root variable. We are instead going to be using the root body. So if we go back to Postman, we can see that we have this tab here called body. This is where we can define the request body. We are going to set up our API so that we can send JSON data in the request body. So let's go and do that. Let's go back to the code and let's get rid of this. Okay, and now let's go back up here to the main function, and let's change this so that we don't have this root variable here. Let's get rid of this. Okay, and now let's go down here, back down to the add item function, and we now have to get the item value from the JSON body. We can do this using the JSON decoder with the request body, which is stored in the request value, this one here. So let's go and do that. First of all, let's create a new variable called new item, which will be of type item. Next, let's use the JSON.new_decoder, and let's pass in the io.reader, which will be the request, which is r.body. Okay, great. Let's now do decode, and inside here we have to pass in the variable where this JSON document should be decoded to, and this is the variable that we created up here called new item. And actually this isn't the value new item, this is a pointer to this location, to the location where the new item value is stored. So that means that we need a pointer, and we can do that by getting the address of the new item variable, and we do that in Golang using the ampersand sign. Okay, so that will now get the address of the new item variable. Great. The next thing we have to do is we have to append this new item to the slice that we called data. Okay, so let's go down here and let's do data is equal to append data, and then pass in new item, not root variable. Okay, so new item. Great, and that's actually it. Let's save this now, and let's go to the terminal, and actually, it says here that we have a problem, and it's saying that the exported type should have a comment or be unexported. Right, okay, so the reason it's saying this is because this is an exported type, meaning that it has a capital letter up here, which means it's exported so that other files can access it. So we can either make this a small I so that it's unexported, like that, or we can just put a comment here, and let's set this comment to item is a struct that groups all necessary fields into a single unit. So that is basically the definition of a struct. Pretty generic, but that will now prevent that warning from showing up here. Okay, let's go to the terminal and let's now do Control-C and do go build and /golang-basic-http API. Press enter. Great. And now let's go to Postman, and now let's try and do this request /add/devstacker. This shouldn't work, but let's see what happens. Let's click send. Great, so now we get a 404 not found status. Awesome. And that's because we no longer have that root, which was /add/item variable. We changed the root to just /add. So let's change that to /add, and let's click send, and let's see what happens. Cool. So we get an array with an empty object. The reason it's an empty object is because we didn't pass anything in the body. So let's change this to raw, and let's change the type to JSON, and let's now create a JSON object to send in the request body. Okay, let's set data to ABC, and let's just make this a bit smaller. Okay, and let's click send. So this isn't good. The request is working because we get 2 objects now, and let's try this again, and we now get 3 objects showing up here. So the request is kind of working, but it's not putting the data inside the object. So let's go and fix this. The reason this is happening is because this is an unexported field. In Go, only fields whose name starts with an uppercase letter is exported. So this field is not exported. This means that this field can't be seen by code that is outside this struct. And therefore, the encode method down here, the encode method won't put this field into the JSON because it can't see it. So to fix this, we can go back up here and we can set this to an uppercase letter. Okay, so now we have data which starts with an uppercase letter, which means it will be exported. So let's save this now, and let's try this again. Let's go to the terminal, and let's do Control-C, and let's now rerun this command, go build and /golang/basic-http API. Press enter, and let's now go to Postman, and let's now rerun this request. Awesome. So now we have an array with 1 object in it, and that object has the field with the key of data and the value of ABC. Awesome. Let's try this again and set this to testing, and let's click send. Great. So now we have 2 objects in this array. Awesome. So that's working really well. Great. But what if we wanted to set the key here to start off with a lowercase letter? We can't set the field here to have a lowercase letter because that means it won't be exported and we won't be able to see the field in the JSON here. So how do we set this to a lowercase letter? Golang provides us with a very useful tool called JSON tags. And it's included in the encoding/JSON package that we've imported up here. And to use JSON tags, we just have to do a backtick here, and then we can do JSON : and here we have to pass in a string for what we want this key to be. So let's set this to data, and make sure that you encapsulate this in double quotes like that. Okay, let's save this now, and let's go to the terminal, and let's do Control-C, and let's now rerun that command, press enter, and now let's go to Postman, and let's now resend this request. Great, so now we can see that this has a lowercase letter. Awesome. So that is how JSON tags work. This can be literally anything. So this could be this can be anything. Let's save that, and let's restart the server, and let's go to Postman, and let's send this, and now we can see that this has changed to this can be anything. And the reason that we don't have any data here is because we have to actually change this as well to this can be anything. Okay, let's now click send, and now we can see that we have the data in here. Great. Let's now go back to the code. And let's change this to data. Let's change this back to data. Okay, and all right then. Let's now add a new field. Let's call this field other data, and let's make this an integer, an int, and let's set the JSON tag to other data. Okay, let's save this now, and let's now go to the terminal, and let's cancel the execution of this using Control-C, and let's now re-execute that command and press enter, and let's go to Postman. Alright then, so let's now send this request like this, and here we get an array with an object that contains data and other data. Great, so the new field is showing up here. Awesome, okay. But we don't have any data in here, and that's because we have to change this to data. Okay, let's now click send, and now we have this new object here which has the data set to testing. Great. And here we can see that the other data is being set to 0. This is because we haven't specified what that field should be here. So Go is setting it to the default value for integers, which is 0. This is the 0 value. This is the default value for integers. It's called the 0 value. And we can see if we search here, Golang 0 value, it says here that variables declared without an explicit initial value are given their 0 value. And the 0 value is 0 for numeric types, such as integer. So that is why this is 0, because no explicit initial value was provided. Let's provide a value here, other data. Let's set this to 555. Let's click send. And now we can see that we have this new object here, which contains 555 as the value for the other data field. Great. Cool. All right. So let's go back to our code. Let's now make this a bit more interesting. Let's actually delete this struct here, and let's create some new custom types that will resemble a real-life application. Alright then, okay, so let's create a new struct called post. So type post struct, and the post struct will have a title field, which will be a string, and the JSON tag will be title with a lowercase t, Okay, and it will have a body field, which will be a string as well, and the JSON tag will be body. Okay, and the next field will be an author field. Author. And now we don't really have a good type for this. We can't really set this to a string because the author will have multiple properties, such as the name and the email. But for now, let's set this to a string, and let's just presume that the author field will be the name of the author. And let's set the JSON tag here to author. Great. Let's save this now. And now we can see that we have some errors. Let's look at what this is. This is a warning that's saying exported type post should have a comment or be unexported. Okay, so let's quickly give this a comment. Post is a struct that represents a single post. Okay, let's save that now. And that warning has gone. Great. Let's now fix these errors here. Let's change this to a slice of posts. Okay, let's save that. And that error has gone. Let's now move on to the next error, which is here. Let's change this to new post, which is of type post. Okay. And let's save that now. Okay, and let's fix these errors. Let's just change this to new post, and let's change this one to new post as well. Great, let's save that, and now we don't have any more errors. Great. Let's now go back up here, and actually let's go to the terminal, and let's cancel this one using Control-C, and let's re-execute that command to rebuild the application and restart the API. And let's now go to Postman and let's test this out. Let's change the JSON body here, and let's set title to new post, and let's set the body as lorem ipsum, and let's set the author to John Doe. Okay, let's send this request. And now we get an array with this object. Great. Let's now go back to the code, and let's go here to this data variable, and let's change the name of this variable to posts so that it makes a bit more sense. And let's save this, and let's go and fix the errors. Let's change this to posts, and this to posts, and this one here to posts. Let's save this, and all of the errors go away. Great. The next thing we want to do is we want to make this author be a more complex type. The author should have multiple fields, such as their full name, their username, and their email. So let's create a new custom type called user. So type user struct, and let's create a full name field, which is of type string, and the JSON tag will be full name. And let's create another field, which will be username, which will be a string, and the JSON tag will be username. Okay, and the last field will be email, which will be a string as well, and the JSON tag will be email. Great. Let's save this now, and let's now go back down to here, and actually let's fix this warning. Let's just put a comment here. User is a struct that represents a user in our application. Okay, let's save that. Great, so now we don't get this warning anymore. Let's go back down here to the post struct, and let's just change this author type to user. Great, let's save this now, and let's now go to the terminal, and let's now re-execute the go build command and restart the API. Let's now go to Postman, and let's now send this, and we get this object here, and the author field is a object which contains the full name, the username, and the email. Great. But these don't have values because we didn't specify what they would be. We actually provided an incorrect value here, so Go didn't put any values in here. So let's change this to an object, and let's set the full name to John Doe, and let's set the username to John.Doe, and let's set the email to jdoe@test.com. Okay, let's now send this request, and let's now scroll down here, and now we have this object here which contains all of that information. Great. So that works. So now we have an API that can handle a more complex, a more real-life situation where we have data that has multiple properties and nested objects. So this is a nested object here. So that's what most real-life APIs will have, and our API can now handle that. Great. Alright then, let's go back to the code, and let's make this API more interesting. Let's implement full CRUD functionality. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. And those are the 4 operations that we do with data. We create data, we read data, and we update data, and we delete data. So let's make this API perform all 4 of those functionalities. Let's implement that now. First of all, let's go down here, and let's actually change this root. This root doesn't make much sense. The /add root doesn't make much sense because the path is describing the action, right? So /add will add an item. So the path is describing the action, but the method is already doing that. We are using the post method here, which typically represents creating new data or adding new data. So we don't need the root path to describe the action because the method is already doing that. So let's change this to /posts. So now the root path is describing the resource and not the action. Great, that's much better. The next thing we can do is create a route for getting the items. So let's do that now. Let's create a new route handler, router.handleFunc, and let's set this to /posts, and let's now create that function. So let's go here and let's create a new function called getAllItems, and actually let's change this to getAllPosts, and this is a HTTP route handler, so it has to take in the http.response-writer and the http.request, which is a pointer to a http.request. Okay, and there we go. Let's now go back up here to this line of code here, and let's set the function to getAllPosts, and now let's do .methods, and let's set this to get. Okay, so the get method will be used to get all the posts. Great. Let's now go to the getAllPosts function, and let's implement this. Let's type in JSON.newEncoder and pass in W and do .encode and pass in the posts slice. Let's save this now, and let's now go to the terminal and let's rerun this command. Okay, let's now go to Postman and let's go here and let's try and send this request. Great, so here we have a 404 not found status. That's good because we changed the route path. the path is no longer /add, but it's now /posts. Okay, let's now click send, and now we get a 200 OK status, and we get this response body, which has an array with the object that we just passed into the JSON body here, into the request body. Cool, okay. So that works. Let's now go and see if the GET request works. Let's now go and test if the GET request works. Let's go here, and this was an old request that we had. Let's just close this, and let's create a new request, and let's set this to a GET method, and let's set the URL to localhost 5000 / posts. Okay, and let's click send. Great. So here we now have an array of objects. However, it's formatted in text, not in JSON. So to fix this, we can go back to the code, and we can set the header, so w.header, and set the content type header to application/JSON. Okay, let's save this now. And we're getting an error. Oh, this should be .set, sorry. Okay, so this should be like this, and then .set, like that. Save that, and there we go. Let's now go to the terminal, and let's Control-C to cancel that, and let's re-execute this command. Okay, let's now go to Postman, and let's resend this request. And now we get an empty array, and it says JSON here. Great. Let's now go to the post request, and let's send this. Let's send this request. Great. And now we have this here. Let's now go back to the GET request, and let's send this. And now we can see that object in here. Great. So the GET request works. Let's go back to the post request, and let's add a few more. Let's set this to second post. This is the second post. Okay, let's click send. Okay, and here we have the second post. Great. Let's now go back to the GET request, and let's send this request. And now we can see both of the posts here. Great. Awesome. Okay, so that's working perfectly. Let's now go back to the code, and let's now create another route for getting an individual post. So not all of the posts, but an individual post. So let's go here, and let's do router.handle func, and this will be /posts / and then here we need a route parameter, which will be the ID of the post that is being requested. So let's use curly brackets here, and let's set the parameter as ID. Okay, and let's now go and create the handler function. So let's go down here, and let's do func. Actually, let's do it up here so that it makes more sense. So we will have func get post, and then we have the get all posts, and then we have the add item. Okay, so we will have the get functions up here, and this is a route handler, so we have to pass in w/http.response-writer and r, which will be a pointer to a http.request. Okay, so now let's go back up here to this line of code here, and let's pass in get post, and let's now do dot methods, and this will be get. This route will be using the get method. Okay, great. Let's now go to the get post function, and let's implement it. So first of all, we have to get the ID of the post from the route parameter. Okay, so here we can do var id param, which is of type string, is equal to mux.vars, and it takes in the pointer to the http.request value, which in this case is r, and then this returns a map. So this will return a map of all of the root parameters. In this case, we only have one parameter, and we are only interested in getting that one, which is the ID parameter. So because this returns a map, we can get the ID value by just passing in ID in square brackets to get access to the value in this map, which has the key of ID. Okay? And the next thing we have to do is we have to convert this from a string to a integer. So the way that we can do this is by using a function that is part of the string conversion package. And this function is called a2i, and it returns two values. It returns the integer, and it returns an error. And if there's an error, then the error value won't be nil. So let's do ID. So that is what we will call the variable that holds the integer ID. And we will then say error is equal to strconv. So that is the package that we want to use. And then do dot a2i. Okay? And then pass in the string that we want to convert to an integer. And that is the ID param variable. Okay? And actually, this has to have a colon here, because we aren't initializing the variables explicitly using var. So that's why we have to use the colon here. Okay? And the next thing we have to do is check if there was an error. If error isn't equal to nil, then there was an error. There was an error. So let's do w.writeHeader, and let's pass in 400. This is the status code. And let's do w.write, and this method takes in a slice of bytes. So let's actually do a conversion from a string to a slice of bytes. So let's type in slice of bytes, and then do brackets, and in here we can then type in a string, and it will then be converted to a slice of bytes. So let's type in ID could not be converted to integer. Okay, and then let's return. Let's return, so that the code below won't be executed if there's an error. Okay, so let's now go here and let's do some error checking. If ID is greater than or equal to the length of the post slice, then the ID is out of range, because in this API, the ID corresponds to the position of the post in the slice. So the ID is the index. So if the ID is greater than or equal to the length of the posts, then the ID is invalid. It's out of range. So we have to do w.writeHeader 404. This is the status code for not found. And then let's do w.write, and let's do the same thing as above. Let's convert a string to a slice of bytes. So let's do slice of bytes, and then brackets, and then inside here let's type in a string, no post found with specified ID. Okay, and then let's find that post. So let's do post colon equals posts, and then let's get the post that's in the index position specified by the ID. And then let's do w.header dot set content type to application/JSON, and then let's do JSON dot new encoder and pass in W, and then do dot encode and pass in post. So this will then send that post that is at position ID in the post slice. It will send this in the response. Alright then, let's save this now, and we can see that the string conversion package has been automatically imported. Great. So let's now go to the terminal and let's restart the API. Let's re-execute this command to build our code and start the API, and press enter. And let's now go to Postman, and let's first of all go to this GET request here, get localhost 5000/posts. Let's send this, and we can see that we have no posts. So before we can try and get an individual post, we first have to create one. So let's go to the post request here, the request with the method post, so that we can create a new post. So let's change this to first post. Okay. Okay, and let's click send. Okay, and that's been added. Let's now go to this request, click send, and we can see that we get all of the posts, and currently we only have this one here. Okay, let's now go and create a new request here, and let's test out the request to get a specific post, an individual post. So let's set the HTTP method to get, and let's set the URL to localhost 5000/posts/ and then here we have to pass in the ID. And currently we only have one item, this one here, and this item is in index 0 because it's the first value in the slice. So it's at index 0. Let's go back to this request here and let's type in 0. Okay, let's click send, and there we go. We get the first post being shown here in the response. Awesome. Let's add another post. Let's go to this request here, the request with the post method, and let's change this to second post. Okay, let's click send. Okay, and now we can see that we have two values in this array, the first post and the second post. Great. Let's now go to the GET request and let's click send, and we can see here that we get an array with both of those posts here. So now this is where this request here, the request that gets an individual post, will look different to this one here, because this request here has returned two items, and this one will now still only return this one because we are retrieving an individual post at index 0. Let's click send. Great, so we only get this post here. Awesome. Let's change this to 1. Let's change the ID to 1, and let's click send. And now we have the second post here in the response. Great, so this route is working. Awesome. Let's go back to the code and let's create another route. Let's now create a route for updating a post. Let's go up here and let's do router.handlefunc, and let's do /posts/ and then here we will need a route parameter for the ID because we need to know which post we need to update. So let's do curly brackets and let's type in ID like we did up here with this one. Okay, and now we have to pass in the route handler function. So let's go and create that now. Let's scroll down here and let's create a function for the update route handler. So let's do function update post, and this will take in W, which will be a http.response writer, and it'll take in R, which is a pointer to a http.request. Okay, there we go. And let's now go back up here and let's specify that the root handler function is update post. There we go. And then let's do dot methods. And for this, we are going to use the put method. The put method is usually used to update resources. So that is the method that we are going to use for this route. Okay, let's go back down to the update post function and let's implement this function. First of all, we have to get the ID of the post that we have to update, and that ID is in the root parameters. So let's get the ID of the post from the root parameters. Okay, let's do the same thing that we did up here. So let's do that same thing down here. Let's do var ID param, which is of type string, is equal to mux.vars, and pass in R, and this will return a map, so we can then just pass in ID to get the value that's at the key ID. Okay, and then we can do ID comma error colon equals, and then do string conv, so strconv dot a to I, and then pass in the ID param string like that, and that will then convert the ID parameter from a string to an integer and store it in the ID variable. Okay, and now we have to check if there was an error. So if error isn't equal to nil, then there was an error. So let's do w.writeHeader and set the status to 400, and then let's do w.write, and this takes in a slice of bytes. So let's do a conversion from string to slice of bytes. Okay, so do the square brackets and then byte and then normal brackets, and inside here we can pass in a string. ID could not be converted to integer. Okay, and then let's do some error checking. If ID is greater than or equal to the length of the posts slice, then the ID is out of range. The ID is invalid. So let's do w.writeHeader and let's set the status code to 404 for not found, and let's now do w.write and let's do a conversion from string to a slice of bytes. So do the square brackets and then byte and then the brackets as usual, and type in a string here, which will be no post found with specified ID. Okay, and then here we have to return so that the code below doesn't get executed if there's an error. And actually we have to do the same thing up here. Let's return here as well. Okay, great. Let's now go down here. Okay, so that is all of the error checking out of the way, and now we can get the value from the JSON body in the request. Okay, so first of all, we have to create a variable to hold the decoded data from the JSON body. And let's call this variable updated post, which is of type post. And now let's get the value from the JSON body. Let's decode it into this variable. So let's do JSON.newDecoder and pass in the JSON document, which is the request.body. Okay, and then let's do .decode And here we have to pass in a pointer to the place where we want to store the decoded data, and that is the updated post variable. So let's get the address of the updated post variable and pass it into the decode method. So to get the address, we have to use the ampersand and then the variable name, updated post. Okay, great. And then let's do, so now we have to update the post value in our posts slice. So let's do posts, and let's get the post at the index of the ID that was passed in the request parameter. And let's set this equal to updated post. Okay. And then let's just send it in the response. So let's do JSON.new encoder and pass in W, and then do .encode and then pass in updated post, and we have to do w.header.set content-type and set this to application/JSON. Okay, great. So that's good. Let's save this now. Great. So let's now test this. Let's go to the terminal and let's do Control-C and let's re-execute this command. Press enter and let's go to Postman and let's create a new request here and let's set this to put. And actually, before we can do this, we first have to create a new post, because currently if we go to the get/posts route and send, we don't have any posts. So let's go to the post request and let's change this to first post. Okay, and send this. Okay, let's go to the get request again, let's send, and now we have one item in the array, which is this first post. Great. Let's now go to the put request and let's type in localhost 5000/posts/ and then here we can type in 0 and let's go to the body tab here and let's go to raw and set it to JSON. And let's now and actually let's go to the post request and let's just copy what we've got here and let's paste it in the put request. Okay, and let's just change some things. So let's change this to updated and let's click send. And it's saying cannot get any response. Oh, okay, that's because I got the port wrong. I missed out a 0. Okay, great. So localhost 5000/posts/0. Let's click send, and there we go. Great. So here we have the updated post object in the response body, and the title has been set to updated. Great. Let's go to the get request, and let's do get/posts/0, and let's send this. And here we can see that we have updated. Awesome. Let's go to the get/posts, so the get all posts route. We did send this just before we made the put request. So this was the state of the posts slice just before we made the update. Let's see if this says updated. Okay, let's click send. Great. Awesome. So that post has been updated. Great. Let's go back to this request here. And let's now see what happens if we change these fields in here, inside the nested object. Let's see if we can change this to Jane Doe. Let's change the username to Jane.Doe, and let's change this to janedoe@testing.com, and let's now click send. Okay, and that seems to have worked. the fields inside the author object have been updated. So here we have Jane Doe and Jane.Doe and Jane Doe at testing.com. Awesome, so this route works. But what happens if we don't specify all of the fields? Let's say that we only wanted to update the title. So then there is no point in specifying these fields because we're not changing them. So let's not include them, and let's just include the title, and let's change this to this has been updated again. Okay, let's click send. Okay, and this happened. So the title has been updated, that's good, but all of the other fields have been set to their 0 values, their default values. So they are now all blank. The reason this is happening is because we are replacing the post with what was passed into the request body. And since we haven't specified all of the other fields were set as their 0 value, their default value. And in this case, since these are all strings, these are all the empty string, because that is the 0 value of strings. So the put request is actually typically meant to replace the object. So this is actually okay. However, it would be nice to provide a way for the consumer of this API to be able to send update requests with only the data that they want to change, so that the consumer of this API doesn't have to send the whole object with all of its fields in the request body if they don't have to update all of the fields. Okay, so let's create a route that can take in partial data and just make the updates to those fields. Okay, so let's go back to the code and let's go up here. Okay, and let's do router.handle func, and this will be /posts/id as usual. And let's go and create the route handler function for this, and let's call this patch post. Okay, and this is a route handler, so it has to take in the http.response writer, and it has to take in a pointer to http.request. Okay, and let's now go back up here and let's pass in that function here, so patch post, and the methods will be patch. Okay, great. Let's now go back down here and let's implement the patch post function. So first of all, we have to get the ID of the post from the root parameter, and we have done this already up here and also in the get post function as well. So all of this code is exactly the same. So let's go to the update post function and let's just copy this section here. Let's copy it. Okay, and let's paste it here in the patch post function. Great, okay. Let's now get the current value. So let's create a variable called post, and let's set this equal to posts and then pass in the ID. Okay, and then let's do JSON dot new decoder and pass in R, and then do dot decode, and then let's pass in the address of this post variable here, because the decode function requires a pointer. So let's pass in the address of post. Okay, and then let's now do w.header.set content-type and set this equal to application/JSON. And then let's do JSON.new encoder and pass in w, and then do .encode, and then let's pass in post to respond with the updated post value. Okay, let's save this now, and let's go to the terminal. Oh, we have an error here. What's this? Decode reads the next JSON encoded value. Cannot use R as type io.reader in argument. Oh, okay. This is because this has to be r.body. Okay. Let's save that. There we go. Great. Okay. So now we don't get any errors. Cool. All right. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So this will decode the JSON object in the request body, and then it will be decoded into the post variable. Okay. Let's save this now, and let's go to the terminal. Let's do Control-C, and let's re-execute this command. Okay, let's go to Postman. Let's create a new request here, and let's set the method to patch. Okay, and before we do this, let's actually go and create a new post, because currently, if we go to the get/posts request and send, we don't have any posts. So let's go to the post request and let's send this. Okay, so now we have the first post in the posts slice. Okay, great. And let's confirm that by going to the get/posts request and sending it. And there we go. So now we can see that we have an array with this item in it. Great. Let's now go to the patch request, and let's set the URL to localhost 5000/posts/0. Okay, and let's go to the body tab, and let's click on raw, and set this to JSON. Okay, and let's create a JSON object here, and let's set the title to updated. Okay, let's click send, and there we go. So now we have the updated value being shown here, and the title is now set to updated, and everything else is the same. Great, so we were able to send only one field to the API, and only that field was updated. Great. Awesome. Let's now try and also update something else. Let's update the body, and let's set this to this has been updated as well. Okay, and let's click send, and now we can see that the body has also been updated. Great. Let's remove these, and let's try and update the full name of the author. Okay, so let's try and update that. Let's do author is an object, and let's set full name to, so it's currently John Doe. Let's change this to Jane Doe. Jane Doe. Okay, and let's send this. And there we go. So this was able to only update the full name of the author. Great. Let's also update the username to jane.doe, and let's click send. Great. Cool. So the patch route works perfectly. Awesome. Let's just double check that this worked by going to the get request, and we can see here that we have this first post. Let's click send, and let's see if it's been updated. It hasn't been updated. So this didn't work. The patch request that we made didn't work because this post value hasn't been updated. The reason this is happening is because here we are creating a new variable, and the contents of this variable are copied from what's stored at the ID index of the posts slice. So here we are creating a new variable, and we are decoding into that variable. However, this new variable is lost. It's not saved to the slice. So there's two ways we can fix this. Here we could do posts ID is equal to post, So save that and let's go here and let's do Control C and re-execute this command in the terminal. Okay, and let's now go to Postman and let's try this again. Let's go to the post request and let's create this post. Okay, that worked. Let's go to the GET request and click send. Okay, so now we have this first post here. Great. Let's now go to the patch request and let's send this request. Great, so that seems to have worked here. Let's now go to the GET request and let's see if it's updated here. Let's send this. Great, this has now been updated. Here we have the full name of Jane Doe and the username is jane.doe. Great, so this has been updated. Awesome. So that is one way of fixing this issue. Another way is we can set the post to be a pointer to what's stored at post's ID. So let's try that. Let's delete this line of code here and let's set this post variable equal to the address of what's stored at post's ID. So let's use the ampersand to get the address of what's stored at post's ID. So now this is a pointer to that value. And in here we can remove the ampersand here because it's already a pointer. Okay, let's save this now and let's go to the terminal, Control C, and let's re-execute this command and let's go to Postman and let's try this again. Let's send this request and here we can see that we don't have any items. So let's go to the post request and click send. Okay, let's go to the GET request again, click send, and now we can see this first post. Okay. Okay. Let's now go to the patch request and let's now send this request. Okay. Let's now go to the GET request and let's send this, and hopefully it should be updated. Click send, and there we go. This has now been updated. The full name is set to Jane Doe, and the username is set to jane.doe. Great, so this method also works. By using a pointer, we were able to fix the issue. Alright then, okay, so that now works. The last thing we have to do is create the delete route. So let's go up here, and let's do router.handle func, and let's set the path as /posts/id. Okay, and we now have to create the route handler function. So let's go to the bottom here and let's create a new function called delete post. Okay, and this will take in a http.response writer and a pointer to a http.request. Okay, cool. So let's go back up here and let's set the handler function to delete post. Great, and let's set the methods here, .methods to delete. Great, okay. Let's now go to the bottom and implement the delete post function. So first of all, we have to get the ID and do the error checking, which is the same as what we've been doing in all of the other functions. So let's go to the patch post function and let's just copy this code here. Let's copy it and let's paste it in the delete post function. Okay, great. Cool, okay, so now we have to remove the post from the post's slice. And to do this, we have to use a trick because there isn't any delete method on a slice in Go. The good news is that there is a page on the Golang wiki that shows us how to delete from a slice. So from here, we can just copy this and paste it in our code. Okay, so let's paste it in here. There we go. And let's change A to posts, and let's change it here to posts as well, and let's change it here to posts as well. Great. Cool. All right. And let's also change this I to ID. And here as well. Okay. Great. Let's just add a comment here. Delete the post from the slice. Okay. And I'll also put the link here to that GitHub page, that GitHub wiki page for the slice tricks. This one here. Okay, cool. So the next thing we have to do is we have to send the response. And for the response, we don't really have anything to send in the response body. So let's just send a 200 OK status, and that should be enough. So let's do w.writeHeader, and let's just set this to 200. Okay, great. And that's it. Let's save this now, and let's go to the terminal, and let's Control-C this to cancel that, and let's re-execute this command. Press enter, and let's go to Postman, and let's send this request to the get/posts request. Let's send that, and we have an empty array. Okay, let's go to the post request, and let's send this. Okay, and let's go to the get request again. Let's send this, and now we can see that we have one post in the slice. Alright then, okay, so let's now go and create a new request in Postman. Let's set the HTTP method to delete so that we can test out our delete route. And now let's type in the URL of our delete route, which is localhost 5000/posts, and then here we have to do slash and then the ID of the post. And the ID is going to be 0 because it's the first item in the slice. Okay, and let's go and click send. And here we have a 200 OK. So here we have a 200 OK status, so that looks promising. And let's now go to the get request. Let's go back to the get/posts request, and let's click on send. And now we get back an empty array. Great. So that means that the delete route worked because it was able to delete our post from the slice. Awesome. Great. So that route works. Let's now do a few more tests. Let's go to the post request. Okay, and let's click on send. And let's go to the body. And let's try and change some of these. Let's change this to second post. And click send. And let's go to the get request. And let's send this. Okay. And we now get 2 posts in the JSON array. Let's change this so that this says this is the second post. So let's go to the patch request, and let's go to the body, and first of all, let's go to the URL, and let's change this to 1. Okay, let's change the ID to 1 because we want to change the second post, which is the second element of the slice. So the index of this post is 1. Okay, so let's go back to the patch request, and let's now go to the JSON body here, to the JSON body, and let's change this so that we just set the body, and let's set the body as this is the second post, and let's now click send, and now we get back the updated post, and the body is set as this is the second post. Great. So the patch request works. That's good. Okay, let's now go to the put request, and let's try and do a put request to /1 to that post, which has ID of 1. Okay, and let's go to the body, and let's try this. Let's send this, and now everything else has been set to its default value, the 0 value of these fields. Great. Okay, so the title has been set to this has been updated again, like we did up here, and everything else has been set to its default value. This is good because we are using a put request. So our intent is to replace the post that is at index 1 of the slice. And that's what we did. Great. Let's now go to the delete root and let's try and delete it. But before we do that, let's go to the get request and let's send this. Okay, and here we can see that the second post has been updated to this post data here. That's good. Let's now go to the get request here to get a specific post, and let's send get /posts/1, and let's go and send this. And now we get just that post in the response. Great. And the reason I wanted to do this was so that when we delete it, we can then go back and see if it's still here. Okay, so let's go to the delete root, the delete request here, and let's click send. Oh, and let's just change this to /1 so that the post with ID 1 will be deleted. Okay, let's click send and we get a 200 OK, so that looks good. Let's now go to the get request and let's now click send, and now we get a error. Could not get any response. Could not get any response. Let's go back to the code and to the terminal and let's see what happened. So here we get an error. Okay. Okay, and here we can see that the error is that the index was out of range. Index was out of range 1 with a length 1. This does make sense because the index is out of range, but I thought we did add some validation to prevent these errors from occurring, to prevent these errors from crashing our program. So let's go and see why this is happening. Let's go to the get post function, get post, and let's see what's going on. So if ID is greater than or equal to length of posts, then this should happen. Okay, so the ID that we passed in was 1. So if 1 is greater than or equal to length of posts, and the length of posts was 1, because we still have 1 post inside, if we go here and send this, then we have 1 post in here. So the length of posts should have returned 1. So if 1 is greater than or equal to 1, then this should have happened. Oh, okay, so the reason that this is happening is because this code is still being executed because we aren't returning. Here we should return so that we prevent this code below here from executing. Okay, so let's now save this with the return statement here. Okay, and let's now go to the terminal and let's now do Control-C to cancel that, and let's now re-execute that command. Okay, press enter, and let's go to Postman, and let's click on send here on the get request, the get/posts request, on the get/post request. Okay, press send, and we get an empty array. That's good. Let's now go to the post request, and let's click send, and let's go to the get request, and let's click send. Okay, so we now have this post in here. Let's now go to the get request here, and let's do get/posts/0, and let's click send. Okay, and let's now go to the delete request here, and let's change this to /posts/0 because we want to delete the post at position 0 of the slice, at index 0 of the slice. Okay, and let's now click on send. We get a 200 OK. Let's now go to the get /posts/0 request, and let's now click on send, and hopefully we won't get an error like we did last time. Okay, let's click send, and there we go. Now we see no post found with specified ID, and a 404 not found status. Great. So this is now fixed, because before this would have crashed. Let's actually go and see what happens when we comment out this line of code. Let's just comment that out. Let's save that, and let's go to the terminal. Let's do Control C and re-execute that command. And let's go to Postman. And first of all, let's go to this request here, the get/post request, and let's click send. Okay, so we get an empty array. That's good. Let's now go back to the get/posts/ID request, where the ID here is 0, and let's click send. And here we get that error, where the API can't respond because we get this error here. So there we go. So it's because of this line, okay? So we have to return here so that this code isn't executed when the ID is out of range, when the index is out of range, okay? Let's now save this, and let's go back to the terminal, and let's do Control C, and let's re-execute this, press enter, and let's go back to Postman, and I think we've tested everything, but let's do one last check. Let's go to the post request, and actually let's go to the get request here. Let's go to get/posts, and let's click send, and we get an empty array. That's good. Let's go to the post request to create a new post. Let's call this first post, and let's change this to testing 1, 2, 3. This is the first post. Okay, and let's click send. Okay, and we get this array back. Okay, and let's now go to the get request here, and let's click send, and we can now see that we have this post in the array. Great. Okay, let's now go to this request here, and now let's click send. Okay, and that works as well. Let's actually change this to an ID that is out of range. Let's change this to an ID that doesn't exist. For example, 5, and let's click send, and we get a 404 not found error. Great. Let's try this again with /0 and click send, and we get this back. Great. So that works. Let's now go and try and update this using the put request. So let's actually go back to the post request, and let's just copy this JSON object, and let's paste it into the JSON body of this request, the put request. Let's paste that in, and let's actually change this to /posts/0, because that's the one that we are working on, because we only have one post in here. So /posts/0, and let's now go to the JSON body, and let's make some changes. Let's change this to updated by put request. Okay, and let's go to the body, and let's just change this to ABC, and let's change the author as well. Let's change this to Jane Doe, and let's change the username to jane.doe, and let's go to the email and change this to janedoe@test.com. Okay, let's now click send, and here we get back the object with the updated fields. Great. So the put request works. Let's now go to the patch request, and let's change this URL to /posts/0, and let's just change the body, and let's change this to this has been updated by patch request, by a patch request. Okay, let's click send, and there we go. The body has been changed to this has been updated by a patch request, and everything else has remained the same. Great. So the patch request is working. And the final route that we have to test is the delete route. Okay, so let's make sure that this is /posts/0, and let's make sure that the method is delete, and let's go and click send. Okay, and we get a 200 OK status. That looks good. Let's now go to the GET request, and let's send this request. And here we get a 404 not found because it doesn't exist, because we deleted it. Awesome. Okay, so that's working. Let's now go to the GET request here, the get/post request that gets all of the posts, and let's see if we get an empty array. Okay, let's send this, and we get an empty array. Awesome. Cool, so that was all of the routes. We have now tested all of our routes. So now this API can create, read, update, and delete data. Awesome, so now we have a fully functioning CRUD API that's been written in Golang. Awesome, okay, so that's the end of this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.